Welcome back to the Hammer and Grind podcast. Today, I got a special guest on today. I want to introduce to you Aaron Henderson. Aaron is a product marketing manager for Stack Construction Technologies. Aaron Henderson is on a mission to scale contracting organizations, leveraging technology to increase efficiency and minimize risk. Over his career, Aaron has worked with top architecture, engineering, and construction industry leaders to streamline systems and develop strategies for more effective growth. Aaron, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Happy to be here, man.
So give us kind of just a little bit of a background, how you got into construction, how you got into the software development game. Like, just give us a 30,000-foot view, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I've got, I guess, kind of an interesting background. So I come at things from more of a business perspective, I guess, than actual boots on the ground. But my whole background was came out of school with a construction management degree and a business management degree, and honestly never really realized how the two would kind of play together. But ultimately, kind of actually thought I just spent a little extra time in school than I needed to. But anyway, but I ended up working for a small consulting firm where we worked with architects, engineers, and contractors all over the country. Really around operational efficiency and overall kind of business strategy. And so that's kind of how I got into the industry. About 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to move over to the technology side of the business, and has been really cool. It's something I noticed working with contractors was one of the fastest ways that they could get efficiency out of what they were doing was to implement the right technologies. And so it was just a really natural transition over to the technology side, and kind of continue the same thing, man. Get to work with contractors every day, hear about their business, what they're doing, and just see if we can help make them better.
Yeah, and I've never actually mentioned this before. I love technology. I'm a tech nerd. Mm-hmm. And so my first business that I ever started part-time was I went to school for IT, and so I started a computer business, building computers, building networks and stuff like that, and it was just a part-time gig on the side, but it was my first official, licensed business. So I've always come from the technology first approach. Yeah. And even when I started my business in 2009, websites were kind of just somewhat new. A lot of guys didn't even have a website yet. Mm-hmm. Like, I was the first one to get a website. I was the first one to start collecting Google reviews. Mm-hmm. I just used technology to leverage that, and I always call it a force multiplier, right? Yeah. When you can use technology to really increase that output, it's what allowed me to survive. So I'm excited about having this conversation. We could probably talk for hours about technology, but we'll try to keep it down a little bit. So, yeah,
no doubt.
In your experience, and I like the fact that you came from the business side more so than up through the tools, and I just had this conversation recently, if you're a one-man show swinging the tool, on the tool, swinging the hammer, mm-hmm. like, you can make a good living doing that. Yeah. But if you really want to grow a business, it's a totally different mindset. Yeah. A totally different skill set. And you have to switch from, craftsman to businessman. Yeah. And so I always say, guys that go around saying, I'm an electrician, mm-hmm. I'm a remodeler, like, that's their identity. Yeah. It's wrapped around the craft. And then you have people like, I want to build a remodeling company, or I own a remodeling company. And I just think it's two different mindsets. Would you agree with that?
I do. I definitely do, man. And I think, it's so many of us get into business because we're really good at something, right? And I refer to it as working, in the business versus working on the business, right? And just because we're really good at swinging a hammer or doing something doesn't necessarily mean we're a business person. And so I think, it takes somebody to, really entrepreneurial to go out there and turn their craft into a business. But then too, it means that we've got to add to what we're doing, our knowledge base, and kind of how we look at everything. I think one of the toughest things I see is that contractors, they're so good, it's really hard for them to sort of let go what they're good at personally and trust that kind of next tier, that next layer. I think that first hire, when you first start to turn things over to somebody else, being able to trust that person is something that's a big kind of breaking point, I think, for a lot of people. And so, I think that's the whole mindset, man, is going from the trade guy to being the business guy or gal.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that a lot of guys that do really well are the ones that that start a construction based business and they've never actually swung a hammer, right? They've never actually done it, and so they can't go out and do it. They can't say, oh, I'm going to come and save the day,
Hmm.
put on the tool belt and make everything fix everything.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So like they don't have the option of doing that. Would you agree with that?
I definitely do, man. And I think, it's there's pluses and minuses to both sides of it, right?
Sure.
But I think of it every day from a technology standpoint. If I could really get into code and develop and do all those kinds of things, I'd probably cross over a lot of boundaries that I shouldn't. And so I'm kind of more dependent on my team and the people around me. And so it kind of keeps me in my lane a little bit that I can't go over and do what they do. And so yeah, no, I think you see that a lot. I think some of the more successful people sometimes are the people that just stay focused on what they do really well and let the people around them kind of do what they do. That said, there's definitely room for both sides and advantages to both sides of that. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into kind of the processes, because a lot of what you've background and what you've helped other firms and stuff with is really like process management and stuff like that. So what do you see construction companies doing wrong in terms of how they create processes and systems in their business?
I think the first thing I see is just not creating processes and procedures. Right? It's just
Well,
sort of I've done it this way for 10 years, 20 years, or whatever it's been, and that's just the way that we do it, and we like to think that people are going to learn from us through osmosis. And I think that maybe works at a certain scale, right? For the first couple hires, those kinds of things, apprenticeships, you can kind of learn from each other. But I think at some point you've got to get to a place where you're really documenting those things. And I think another thing that people tend to do is when they do start to document, they get into too much detail. And I don't think documenting process has to be a really laborious kind of an activity. It's sort of just setting like what are the big guidelines or the parameters, and let the people be creative. Let them do what they want to do within those processes. But just know that we want to keep, what are the guide rails that we want to have as a business. And I think those are the things that sort of allow companies to now bring in more people, and they can kind of follow our guide rails, but sort of do their thing within those. But I think the biggest thing is, man, just getting them down in some format, not spending too much time on them to start, and you can always add to them as you go.
Yeah, I think one of the, even for myself, when I started kind of documenting and creating checklists in my business,
Hmm.
the number one thing, we'll get into this a little bit later, but like the number one system that everyone wants to fix is their estimating system,
Yeah.
right? Because it's such a huge, complex, time wasting activity.
Hmm.
But even in systems in general, uh, they look at it and they're like, wow, this is a major system, if you will, that I have to create, and it's overwhelming, and like they don't know where to start,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just like, how would you suggest to someone the best way to get started if they've never really started creating processes or systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at estimating as a whole, like you said, pre-construction, man, is a big deal. So much time gets wasted in the pre-construction phase, and we take on projects we shouldn't, and all those kinds of things. I think the first step of getting started is just, I mean, create. It's going back to like grade school almost. It's like, what's the outline for what I want, right? It's here's the big five steps, and you can always come back and add to them. But I think it's just taking that very first step of just starting to get something down. Specifically around estimating, I think it's starting to define what projects we know we can be successful at, and setting those parameters so that we can kind of get some, I call them go no go variables, right? Like I know that if I have a project in a certain area, or for a certain type of client, we just tend to not be successful on those. I think get those out of your way as early as possible, so that you can kind of start to focus your time and attention to the projects that you really have a chance of being successful with. So I think it's starting as big as you can to weed stuff out early, and then that allows you to focus more time and attention to the projects that really matter.
So just to make sure I understand that, kind of like a 30,000 foot view, like just look at a big scheme and say, who do I want to work for, who do I not, or
Yeah.
what type of projects do I want to do, and what type, what's most important that we get right, and what's something we want to make sure we don't get wrong or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of narrow it down.
You bet, man. I think,
Uh,
one of the things I say a ton is we say a lot more about who we are as business people by what we say no to than what we say yes to. I think you can weed out a lot of stuff that you're not going to be successful at pretty early, if you get some of that stuff down.
well, this is a little bit off topic, but a lot of times I talk to contractors and stuff, and I've done videos on this, but we believe that if the phone rings, like that's our customer, and now I have to sell them somehow. Like it's my job to sell that person,
Yeah.
and it's like no, just because the phone rings doesn't mean that's going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, no, it's without a doubt. And I mean, we run into it on the technology side too. We always want to think that everybody who calls us or talks to us is the right customer. And I think, you know, it's hard to say no. It's really hard to say no sometimes, but when we do, I just feel like that comes back to us tenfold usually. If I tell somebody, hey, I'm not the right software for you, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that same person be really appreciative that we told them that and that we were straight up front. And then they go on to refer us or tell somebody else who is a better fit for us about us. And it just becomes a way better sales cycle for the right opportunity. And I think, same thing in construction for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the things I teach to my clients is, we're even if you can't do them, even if it's somebody that you want to, but the time frame doesn't work, don't actually be nice to them.
Yeah.
like actually try to help them.
Yep.
Don't just not call them back because you're too busy.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who that person knows, how that's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
So I think that applies it pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
Have you read the book Checklist Manifesto?
I actually don't think I have, man. I think I've done about 90% of the business books that are out there, but I don't think I've done Checklist Manifesto.
I just recently read it.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty good. It was written from a doctor who kind of helped start the putting checklists in emergency rooms and stuff.
I've heard about it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, and he went and interviewed a construction, like one of the leading construction companies, and he interviewed some airplane, manufacturers and stuff, how they create checklists for the airline industry.
Yeah.
Really good read. He said in there one thing that I thought was really profound. He said, checklists are not really designed to to teach you how to do the really hard stuff. The checklists are designed to prevent you from doing dumb stuff. It's to get the dumb stuff right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, man, definitely. And I think it's all phases of construction, right? I mean, it starts with pre-construction, goes all the way through the project, but it's kind of that thing of a little bit to what I was saying before is those parameters are just they're not to sort of like put handcuffs on us or to limit us from what we can do. It's to get the stuff out of the way that we don't want to waste our time thinking about, right? Like just get that stuff out of the way. And now my best technicians, my best people, my project managers, my superintendents, my foremen can be out there and they can focus on the stuff they do really, really well. But it's just sort of standardizing, systematizing those basic things that we all have to do. Get that out of the way. Let me focus on the more high payoff activities is usually the way I kind of refer to it.
I remember the very first time I implemented a checklist in our bathroom remodel project we were doing. And one of the things on the checklist was like pre-drywall installation, right? And that's where we're like checking the plumbing, we're checking electrical, we're checking everything, the mechanicals to make sure everything's correct. And one of the things on there was check the plumbing, electrical, and make sure there's strike plates installed. Strike plates that go cut on the nail onto the wood to cover the electrical and plumbing.
Yeah.
And the electrician didn't do it. We had used a different electrician, and he did not put any strike plates on.
Yeah.
And so that checklist caught that. And then we end up putting strike plates on, right? Well, fast forward later in the project, we're installing the cabinet, trying to screw the cabinet screw into the back, and we hit a strike plate.
Yeah.
It was right there where that wire was.
Yeah.
We had put that wire right at the exact height of where we put our so that saved us.
I was just saying, man, that's
would've-
save the project, right? Like you end up upside down in that thing really fast if you didn't check
yeah.
one box, right?
Yeah. I mean, just putting one screw through the wire would have just we would have had ripped out drywall, redone all that. I mean, it would set us back for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So after that happened, I was like, yeah, checklist. You're my fan. I love you. So I mean, but that's kind of the premise of like
Yeah.
that. It kept us from doing something dumb.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't teach us how to like install everything and how to do the actual work.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, you bet.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, that's exactly it. It's I don't want my guys out in the field worried about those little things. Make those the checkbox items. Make sure, and, I say little things that turn into big things, but check the box on those things and let them, build the relationships and do everything else that they do out there to make sure that the customer's happy. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's be honest, construction, there's so many moving parts. Like it's definitely not an easy industry to systematize completely because, you could interview 50 different companies and there's 50 different ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what do you, in regards to like estimating,
Mm-hmm.
what's the main thing you see companies doing wrong when they do estimating in general?
I think it kind of goes back to that little bit of conversation around trying to say yes to everything, right? Like you said, as soon as somebody calls you, we just want to say yes. That's our project. We're going to get it. And I think it's that. And we're such a boom and bust industry. We kind of want to take everything that we can take when we can take it. Make hay when the sun's shining. And I think it's that. I think it's starting to try to weed out projects and kind of back to your checklist. Back to the checklist manifesto. It's having a checklist of what things do we look at on a project that makes sense for us. And it's that reminder, right? Of like, hey, this project, if I check these 3 boxes, that's a good project. If I don't check the boxes, it's not. And being able to say no to that. And I think that's what frees us up to get the right projects, to spend the right time, so that we're working for the right clients, all those kinds of things. I think that's the biggest thing, is just get the projects that we're not going to be good at out of the way quick.
As far as like when you're doing the estimating, like once you've identified the right,
Project.
client job that we want to work for, do you notice anything that, I mean, everybody hates estimating, right? It's probably the least favorite activity of any, unless you're an estimator, like you just, you wake up in the morning, like I get to go estimate. It's not an activity that most people like doing. So, I mean, do you have any tips and tricks? Obviously, software is going to help this
I
out
was going to
tremendously.
say, yeah, not to be self-serving in any regard, but I think that's for us. There's a lot of software out there that can help with it. They can kind of streamline things and make stuff faster. I mean, I still talk to contractors every day that are doing takeoffs by hand. They're going in and doing counts of every little thing that's out there, or building their estimate on a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. And there's software out there that can help you with that. That can help create templates. That can allow you to do takeoffs really quick, so you can get material quantities and understand where you're at with that. I think it's being accurate. The more accurate that we are on estimates, I always say projects are made in the estimate, right? If we bid stuff correctly, there's a lot better chance that we're going to come out good on the back end of that thing. And I think it plays into every aspect of construction. I mean, it's if we bid something wrong, we come in too cheap. Now all of a sudden, when we're out in the field working on it, we're working faster and harder, trying to get to the dollar that we said we would get to. We had an interesting conversation around here not too long ago, but I think it was during Safety Week last year, and somebody said, well, estimating software doesn't really play into safety. And I said, absolutely it does. It plays into every facet of construction. If we bid projects incorrectly, we're now out there trying to make up that money in the field, and that's when stuff starts to get dangerous. So I think it's leveraging everything that we can, whether it's technology or even having our own standard templates ourselves or whatever we do, to try to bid stuff as accurately as we can, so that we know that we're going to come out good on it.
I want to take a slight different direction on this, and because I do have some listeners that are like right in the very beginning stages of trying to start a construction business. I have one actually message me this morning. He's like, "Hey, I'm trying to get into the pool and backyard space. Do you have any recommendations?" So, what would you tell someone who's really new or doesn't have an idea? Like, what's the best way to start to get accurate information about estimating? And I don't mean like what prices. I just mean like where's a good resource or where could they start to get information?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's it's probably twofold, right? Is just, but I think there's a couple things. One, there are good softwares out there that can help you. There are, price databases and things like that that you can start to get some pricing things. Um, tell you the truth, man, I think the biggest thing, take technology and everything else out of the picture, is talking to and working with your suppliers and
Mm,
knowing where they're at with stuff. I think every contractor we have, no matter the size of the scale, is they've got good relationships with their suppliers. They know that they're getting the right pricing on stuff. They know what materials people are using in what areas, all those kinds of things. So I would say start with your suppliers, and then leverage anything else that you can out there, whether it be technology or some of the standard price books and those kinds of things. They're generally pretty high level, but it can at least give you a good idea where to start, I think.
yeah, that's I would agree with that. Your suppliers are going to be a really valuable resource, and I've always said you should definitely be befriending your suppliers.
Yeah.
Like you should be like you're not going to go wrong if you bring them donuts, every once in a while. Like that's gonna go pretty far.
It goes both
Um,
ways, right? I mean, hopefully we
yeah,
get to a place that they're courting us, but man, in the beginning, especially, you got to be out there courting them. And, it's construction's a team sport, man. I mean, we tend to get some divides sometimes between, the trade contractors and GCs and suppliers and, all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, the most successful are the ones that form good teams and good partnerships for sure.
awesome. I want to talk a little bit about construction handoffs. Could you talk a little bit about how to streamline that process?
Yeah. I love talking about the handoffs. It's projects for me are made and lost in the handoff, right? It's that handoff, especially depending on the size of the team and those kinds of things. But it's that handoff from estimating to the project team, from the project team to anybody that's handling financials and doing the books on the back end. There's so much information that gets lost because we go through, if we're looking at a project and before it starts, and we're making all these lists and doing all these things and we're digging into this project, and then all of a sudden maybe it might be a couple of weeks before we get started, it might be a month or more before we actually get started on it, and we find ourselves in this place where we didn't write anything down, we didn't document anything in that, and now we go back through and we do the whole thing again. And it's like, I think the more that we can document those things and probably spend, just if you are working on a team where you've got multiple players involved, take 30 minutes during the handoff to talk about the handoff, and walk through everything that you did. Because I think that 30 minutes can be invaluable as you get down a project. If you can share just a little bit of inside information, what you found out during the pre-construction phase with somebody who's actually doing the project, that's going to save them a ton of time if they get halfway into the project and they realize something that you could have just told them in a quick conversation at the front end. So a lot of that just comes down to communication and documentation, I think.
Yeah, I've talked a little bit about it. Effective communication. We get caught up, and I'm just as guilty. But it's like
You bet.
the guy calls you on the job site. Hey, boss, what about what's going on with this one thing? I don't. There's not any information. You're like, you're doing something. You're frustrated, so you just send a quick text.
Mm-hmm.
Just do this,
Uh-huh.
right? And then that leads to like 15 more questions after that. When really, if you just took an extra minute and just kind of like gave them a well thought out reply with all the information they needed, like you would
Yeah.
never get another message. But because we're so busy and because a lot of us are like wearing 18 hats at once, it's always just quick responses, quick responses. I need to solve this as quickly as possible. And that's where a lot of that stuff happens, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this or not, and this may be a little bit of an old school kind of a view of stuff, man. But for me, I love text messaging. I love the speed of it, all those things that we can do. But sometimes it's just pick up the phone, right? Like
Yeah.
if you just pick up the phone, there's so much more that we gain from a quick conversation than we might from a quick text. And I know when we're busy and we've got so much going on and we're putting out fires, sometimes picking up the phone seems too cumbersome. But man, if a couple minute phone call can save us a few hours down the road because somebody learned something that they wouldn't have through text, it's worth a phone call. And I think even a step further than that is us as owners and managers and all these things is trying to be out in the field with the guys, checking in on projects as much as you can. I mean, you learn stuff, and you can't be on every project every day. But if you can be out there at least some, you start to identify little things that we can make better or help train people up on, and those kinds of things that hopefully prevent maybe the text message or the need for communication in the first place. So,
and I like what you said earlier too about taking the time in the beginning, because this also applies when you're out there meeting with the customer, at the job site, and you're kind of going over some stuff, and you're like, man, I just want to get out of here. Like, I don't want to spend another 30 minutes getting all these measurements. They're probably not going to hire us anyways. I can tell they're going to be a waste of time. I'll get those later.
mm-hmm.
And then you end up getting the job. And then guess what? You got to go back out there.
Yeah.
I got to get some more measurements. And so we shortcut these processes the entire time, and they always come back and bite us in the butt, yet we don't ever fix that.
Man, I think for me, the simple solution to that is if it's not worth the time to do it right, it's not worth being out there in the first place. Right? Like,
yeah.
If I'm out there and I'm working on a bid and I'm only doing half what I need to on it because I don't think I'm going to get it, there's maybe a good chance I feel that way. So my advice to anybody that feels like that is focus on the ones that matter, right? And then spend the time to do it right.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
I mean,
where do you,
yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you, I mean, do you agree on that? Is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, we one of the things that we teach in my group is, pre-qualifying people over the phone, right? So we don't do free estimates.
Yep.
We don't run out there and do 20 estimates a week and hope we get 2 of them, and it's just a numbers game. Like, that's silly.
Yeah.
So we really focus on understanding what's important to them and really pre-qualify them over the phone, and then we're getting paid to go out there and do a consultation with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm getting paid, like now I'm definitely interested, and I'm going to be doing the right thing, and so. Yep. That goes back to what you said, which is know who your customers are and really pick the ones that matter, that you want to do, and then focus on them and give them the best service that you possibly can.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to focus on as contractors is exactly that. There's a huge level of professional services that we provide, right? And we don't think about them that way. We don't think of being consultants, but we are. And we're coming out and we're teaching these people how to do projects right. Good contractors do it. Bad ones don't, and bad ones just go out, they bid at volume. Yeah, they might be cheaper. Yeah, they might be this. Yeah, they might be that. But the homeowner doesn't, or the whoever the owner is doesn't get the right result on the back end. But if you're out in front of it and getting paid for professional services and working with the owner and understanding the project, there's a ton of value in that. I think contractors need to know it for sure.
Oh yeah, and that's where it kind of segues perfect to the next thing, which is just technology in general. Because, whenever you just had a phone book and a phone, a landline, not even a cell phone, and everything was written out, it was a lot slower, and just things kind of, you would focus on one thing at a time, essentially.
Yeah.
Right now, with the speed of everything happening, how do you see technology? And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but how do you see technology going forward?
Yeah.
How important is it going to be in construction?
So, I mean, I think, obviously as the technology guy, I'm an advocate. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. That said, I think it can be overwhelming. I think sometimes there's this line that I use a lot is like tech for tech's sake. Like, don't just go out and get technology because you feel like you should or because somebody told you needed to. It's technology needs to solve real problems, right? And so I think the first step in it is, your question is where's it going and how important is it? And I think ultimately it's super important. I think it's the thing that will probably start to differentiate contractors more and more, as we go in the years to come. Something I talk to people about a lot is we're all in the technology business. It's just, what are you doing with the technology? And we as contractors, we spend a ton of money on tools out in the field and all these kinds of things, but we don't necessarily think about investing in tools for the back office. And so, I think the first step is just identifying what problems do we actually have? What's slowing us down? Is it in the handoffs? Where are we losing money? And I think that can be the toughest thing. But I think once you start to do that, we can then start to identify what technologies actually make sense and sort of bite them off, prioritize them and bite them off in a way that we can do it well. Another thing I see a lot of people do is they go out and they try to get all these different pieces of technology all at once. It's overwhelming. They don't end up implementing any of them. And
That's me.
yeah,
That's me.
yeah,
I had my office manager after she started for me a few months in, and we had switched our management software 3 times. Now, to be fair, I had one for 5 years, and then right after she came on board, I'm like, I need a better system, and so then we switched the 3 times or 2 more times after that. She finally set me down. She's like, Brad, you're not allowed to get a new piece of technology until we figure these other things out. Like she's put her foot down, and I appreciate it. Like that's the kind of people I want on my team, actually.
You bet, man. My joke is always it's when I come in and there's a good office manager in place, I go, I know who runs this business. It's a good office manager is worth their weight in gold every time, man, for sure. And I'll tell you, we see a lot of that. We see the office manager a lot of time will do some of the accounting or different things, just kind of depending. There are a lot of times the people to help vet technology. But the single best thing is being able to say no. And we've taken on too much or where we're at. Good office manager will help you with it every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of curious though. This is a little bit off topic a little bit, but like even technology in terms of like tools, like 3D now. A lot of stuff's 3D. I see the future of you have plans created and now you put on VR headsets and see the entire thing before you ever build it. Like how important do you think that's going to really end up being down to obviously in commercial industrial, that's probably going to have a much more, pliable application.
Yeah.
But even down to the small town, home builder or remodeling company, how do you see that working out?
It's interesting. We're like an industry of haves and have-nots to some regard, right? We've got these big, massive commercial guys who are out here doing this crazy stuff with augmented reality and robots and drones and all these things. And I think too often technology just kind of gets lumped into a bucket that's just technology. And I think there's opportunity for all that stuff. I think in time a lot of that will come around, but I think today, a lot of it is just we got to walk before we run. And I think what scares me is people being deterred from technology because they think just a simple estimating software or a simple project management software is the same thing as having a drone. It's just not. They're different things, or augmented reality or Google Glass or these things. So I think it's walking before we run. I think it's identifying what matters and not being afraid of technology because we view it as, some crazy sort of out there thing. But there's just more boots on the ground, frontline technology that I think we need to start looking at. I think those things we're starting to see across the trades at every level, right? Just a basic project management software, estimating software, hopefully financial software. But I think we need to kind of segment those things and look at those a little bit differently, maybe than we do some of those more, forward thinking out in front things that we hear about. That said, I hope that more of that, technology starts to come down to the residential side of construction and those kinds of things. But I think a lot of that's a long way out. I really do.
You would probably agree though, you can't just put your head in the sand and be like, oh, I'm not going to adapt technology. You have to have some level of keeping up with the paces, if you will, to a certain degree. You don't have to be the guy in the front, but you can't be still back at the starting line waiting to start. I mean, would you agree with that?
I definitely do. Yeah, no, and I think it's the whole thing of it's got to solve problems. We don't just want it to have it, but we have to solve problems, and I think we kind of have to prioritize it based on it. But without a doubt, I mean, the more that we look at it, and And we even on the technology side, we see this, but it's you can't just be okay with status quo, man. You gotta be looking forward. And I think project owners, they whether or not you're fully leveraging it or using it, the fact that you're even just thinking about it and paying attention to it and know what's coming matters to a lot of people too. And you definitely can't put head in the sand. You got to be looking at what's coming down the road.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I'm sure you know Chat GPT, right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
talk of everything right now. And it is going to disrupt a lot of stuff this year. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Hmm.
And I had a conversation yesterday on our marketing call with my clients about, not that they have to use it, not that they have to like completely know everything about it, but they should at least keep up with how it could potentially affect your business and how it affects things going forward. And so just really just investing the time and learning more about it. You don't have to
Hmm.
be the expert at it. You don't even have to use it. You just need to understand the trends of how that's going to affect you in the future.
Hmm. You bet. I mean, I think, yeah, the more you look out, I mean, it's kind of that whole thing of like shoot for the moon, you end up in the stars. I think that's it, is like you don't have to be the furthest one out. But even looking at just Chat GPT, you might start to identify other things where you go, oh, this would be cool, or let's look at this or that. So I think making time for technology and innovation and just paying attention to it, it matters, man. It definitely does for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've used it just for like creating simple checklists,
Hmm.
right? Like very
Yeah.
simple ones. We've used it for creating job descriptions,
Hmm.
like, and it saves you time for that. But
Yeah. We've
I want to
done
I want to trans. Go ahead. I'm
strategic
sorry.
plans, outlines, and things like that. I think there's a lot from a business aspect of, it may not be perfect, but it's going to give you a starting point. Yeah, and we've leveraged it around the office a ton. It's kind of fun. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like for me, I was the first guy with a website, right? Like that's kind of sometimes being the tip of the spear. So I want to transition a little bit to Stack, your software that you guys offer, and
Mhm.
just kind of get a little bit of information about that. I was going to pull up the website here.
Yeah.
And so what's like the main thing that you guys, what's the main problem that you guys solve with Stack?
So we started more on the pre-construction side of the business. So our whole goal was really around takeoff and estimating software and trying to streamline that process as much as we could. And we work across the trades. We have our primary focus is around trade subcontractors. We work both in residential and commercial. But more recently, here in the last 2 years, we've made a couple acquisitions where we've brought in more project management. And so now for us, it's really trying to connect up that end to end and really streamline. I mean, you kind of hit with the handoffs is if we can keep everything that we do from pre-construction through project closeout in the same place, we want to do that. And I think there's a lot, there are, other softwares out there that do similar stuff, but I think this focus to the trade contractors is the thing that really sort of sets Stack apart. And what we're really focused on is just bringing that end-to-end solution for the construction process.
Well, the one thing I was looking at when I was checking it out was the just the takeoff itself, like just the
Mhm.
software, how you can just straight up do takeoffs on a set of plans.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's other softwares that can do that, and I know there's other companies that will do takeoffs for you,
Yeah.
which may or may not be good, right? Because you're putting your entire project in the hands of somebody else you don't know, like
Mhm.
for their accuracy,
Yeah.
which to me sounds a little crazy, but it depends on the complexity of what they're doing,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and
Um,
what we do, we actually offer the software to the contractor to do their own takeoff. So
right.
so they would log in and do their own takeoff, which is, can be a huge time savings. And I think one of the biggest differentiators for Stack too is the fact we're 100% cloud based. So a lot of contractors right now are trying to figure out, they may have these old legacy on-prem softwares that they're trying to keep up to date, and they're trying to do all these different things. But with the cloud-based software, we're keeping everything up to date for you. We're locking down your security for you. We're keeping all your data safe for you, and it just prevents the contractor from having to be their own IT shop on the back end, right? Like that they've got everything in the cloud. We're there for them, just kind of making sure that all that stuff works well.
Oh, I mean, for sure. That I remember whenever Amazon came out, it's like, is it safe to buy stuff off the internet? Like, I mean, we've come a long ways from there.
Yeah.
I see contractors are like, I don't want to pay for QuickBooks, online. I like the desktop version. I don't, it's like, okay, this is going back to that conversation about, are you being left in the dust? Are you keeping your head in the sand? Or cloud-based software is, I mean, there's really no other way that you should be doing it, in my opinion.
No, it's huge, and I think more so today than ever, right? I mean, I've been in too many construction offices where we've got a server stored in a back closet,
Yeah.
over there or whatever, and people feel comfortable because it's there. But what they don't understand is all the it's not that secure, right? Like we've got, we've got technology people who are doing nothing, but we have a chief security officer, all these people who are doing nothing but all day monitoring what's happening out there and just making sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent any kind of information leak or anything like that. I think the other thing that we see from the cloud standpoint is especially after COVID and these things is a lot of people are going more remote. I know all of us are having trouble getting the right tradespeople, hiring and these kinds of things. And I think the more flexible that we can be and allow people to work where they want to work, when they want to work, those kinds of things, it's a big thing in hiring right now. And that's the beauty of cloud-based technology is, we don't have to be in the same office next to each other right now. We can be looking at stuff together real time, know what's happening, and kind of let people be as flexible as they want to be. So a lot of big advantages to the cloud, I think.
No, you said you focus mainly on the pre-construction, but you guys also do like field productivity and the entire project management, right? I mean, you
We
can do the
do.
whole
We
thing.
do. Yeah. So, and that's a little bit newer to us, but is absolutely where we're headed. Is full on project management all the way through to closeout. So, some unbelievable tools as far as being able to carry plans with you on your iPad. You can mark things up, do all your punch listing, communicate with any of your trade contractors or suppliers right through the app. Track the project, schedule things out, everything. If you get into a level of commercial with some like RFIs and submittals and those kinds of things, we can absolutely do those kinds of things as well.
What is like cuz and I haven't studied every one of them and I don't know exactly, but like compared to like other softwares out there, the main players, you guys really have more emphasis on the plans and the takeoff side of it, right? Is that is that fair?
We do, and so it's for us for a lot of our projects for a lot of our contractors, the plans are they're like that single source of truth, man. It's like it's where everything comes back to. And even if it's a small project that we sketch up on our own, I think there's still just this aspect of if we can have that be that source of truth, no matter who we're talking to, we're all referring to and looking at the same thing. And so when I tell you that it's on the north wall right here that you need to fix that or change that or do something, we're all looking at it and we all know we can kind of communicate off of that. If I just text you something and you can't have a visual of what that looks like or where that is, it becomes a lot more difficult to kind of communicate about. So we do have a lot of focus to working from a plan set or at least some kind of a visual for sure.
Right. I worked for a home builder, general contractor. We did light commercial strip malls and also built homes when I
Yeah.
first got started. And he was kind of let's just say he was cheap. So we got a set of plans like off the internet,
Yeah.
house plans,
Uh-huh.
and it called for like I think it called for siding. Well, he wanted brick,
Uh-huh.
no problem, but he didn't want to pay to have the plans redrawn with brick.
Uh-huh.
So it was just like, well, we'll just make some adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, the plans were reversed, and so we're like,
Oh no.
holding the plans up in the
Yeah.
air to see it. Well, we're almost done with the project. I'm checking it out. I was a superintendent, and we get up, and there's a stairs going up in the middle of the house, and there's a landing,
Mm-hmm.
and the handrails installed, and the landing is only like 30 inches wide.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Doesn't meet code.
Yeah.
Minimum 36. Well, what happened was when we added the brick,
Mm-hmm.
we added basically 8 inches.
Mm-hmm.
It got lost on that landing,
Yeah.
and it was too late to do anything about it. The house was built.
Yeah. Oh man.
And so like you're saying with having that information on a in a digital format and making sure that it's correct and you can see it and everybody has access to that, like to your point, like it starts with the set of plans,
Yeah.
that, and that's where you're also going to see things that may not be right, like things that weren't done correctly.
Yeah.
When you're doing takeoffs and stuff.
Well, it's exactly what we talked about earlier, right? It's the spend the time up front. If we've done a new version of that drawing, and there's studies out there that talk about this, but if we make a change in pre-construction before we ever start on anything, it's dollar for dollar. It's we'll save that dollar. If we get into starting the build, now all of a sudden that costs us $10, right? It's going to be 10x what it would have cost us to fix it during the design phase. And if we get all the way to we finish the project and we got to go back in and fix something, it's probably going to cost us 100 times what it would have cost us just to fix that on the drawing in the very beginning. So, there's a huge cost savings if we can catch those things early. And I think having those visuals and doing those things and spending the time up front make a really big difference.
Well, we're getting close to the end here. I just like to ask a couple questions. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say is the single biggest thing that contractors need to know and understand about, whether it's pre-construction or construction management processes? I'll leave it up to you. Like, what's the big takeaway that you want them to have from this?
I think it's kind of where we started. I think if it's deciding one if you want to be the person or the guy or the gal, and you just want to have a small lifestyle kind of a business, or if you really want to be a business person and you want to grow something that has more value beyond yourself. And I think if that's the route you want to go, there's investment you have to make in yourself and in your teams, and there's things that you have to do, and they may not be the most comfortable, but I think if you really want to try to have an impact, it's making that decision and then starting to do the things that you need to do to run a real business, whether it's process and procedure, hiring the right people, bringing stuff in. But I think it's technology, whatever it might be that you need to help scale what you're doing. I love people making big impact. And for me, that's something beyond just myself. And so for me, it's making that decision and then starting to make the moves and do the things that they need to do to move in that direction.
Yeah, well said. I agree with that 100%. One last question is, what's a book that you're reading currently, or one that you recommend?
There's two that come to mind, and I've been thinking about them through the entire conversation with you. One is the E-Myth. Have you read the E-Myth?
That's the number one book I recommend.
It's an incredible book, and there's also E-Myth for contractors, and it's really great. And it goes through it leverages the E-Myth, but it's exactly that. It's stop working in the business and start working on the business. And along those lines, there's another one that I like a lot, which is Traction by Gino Wickman. Are you familiar with Traction?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, real similar concepts. I think one of the coolest things that Gino does is he borrows liberally from a lot of different authors that are out there, different books, different concepts. He even references the E-Myth, a number of times. But he just kind of lays out a really good process to start to build a business from, and so I like that one a lot too.
Awesome. Yeah, both great books,
Yeah.
especially the E-Myth. That's always my first book I tell people to read.
Yeah.
If they're like, I just want to start reading books, start with the E-Myth.
Yeah. Every time. It's just Michael Gerber did a great job with the E-Myth, and I think for any entrepreneur, it's worth it. And it's cool too, because some of it is stuff that we all kind of know, but we don't necessarily think about every day. Kind of back to the checklist thing. It's those things you kind of know, but you just don't always remind yourself of. And so, I think for any entrepreneur, picking that thing up, every so often and just rereading it, it'll just remind you of a lot of stuff that you need to be working on and doing. So, big fan of the E-Myth.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, how can people get a hold of you or your, find out more information about your software? Like, where can they go to get information on that?
Yes, technology can be it can be complex and it can be a little confusing for a lot of folks. And so I'm always happy to talk to anybody and hopefully start to at least head them in a good direction with what they're doing from a software perspective. They're welcome to reach out to me directly, A. Henderson at stackct.com. Always happy to respond and help out. Not a sales pitch, but just want people to be able to run their business and do what they do well, and happy to help if I can.
Awesome. Aaron, thanks so much for being on the show, guys. And we'll put the links in the show notes too to be able to get in touch with them and Aaron and Stack. And if you want to check out their software for your project management and pre-construction, they got a really nice software suite there you can check out that could help you in your business. And you know where to find us, guys, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. And until next time, you know what to do. And remember, actually, I screwed up, Aaron, because I changed my tagline a couple of podcasts ago. I'm like in the old mode. The new tagline. Until next time, guys, remember, profit is not a dirty word.
Absolutely.